Welcome to a time of worship on this Friday we dare to call good. In the tradition of a Tenebrae service, we remember the light that has come in Christ Jesus. And as we move through the power of sacrificial love, we experience the darkness that comes. We do so knowing the rest of the story, that Christ is ever present, light not ever extinguished. We've been journeying into the stories that bring us to this night, and we invite you to come with us for a time of reading and meditation as we remember and experience anew, ask for guidance in these days, and as always, give God thanks. Come, enter the Passion. We have been on quite a journey during Lent. We have put ourselves in the stories of Holy Week for some time now because they're important to our faith journey and our identity as followers of Jesus. We have freeze-framed moments in Holy Week so that we might put ourselves in the picture and enter the passion of Jesus.
Enter the story. Enter the place you belong, not just looking on, for this is your story. Enter the story. Enter the story. Enter the place you belong, not just looking on, for this is your story. Enter the story.
Tonight, the characters we have experienced by zooming into the works of art will step into our picture. We will hear from them again, but this time they'll come to us knowing the rest of the story. Some of you may remember Paul Harvey's radio show where he would tell a story and set up a dilemma, and after the commercial break, he'd come back and tell the rest of the story. He'd offer some surprising twist. Holy Week is a time to mourn the continued suffering in the world, but we do so knowing the surprising twist of the story of Jesus. We are Easter people, and so we live in a post-resurrection era that reminds us that suffering and death is overcome when we follow Jesus' command to be the agent of change in a world that so desperately needs a word of resurrection hope.
Enter the passion. Enter the place we belong, not just looking on, for this is our passion. Enter the passion. Enter the story. Enter the passion. Enter his passion.
I was the one on the ledge overlooking the parade of Jesus. I was fascinated with what I had heard about Jesus, and honestly, perhaps downright scared. But I showed up outside the gates to the city that day to watch his entrance. The crowd was chanting, "Hosanna," which means, "Save us," as if a man on a donkey could free us from all that oppresses. Looking back on it, the donkey was part of his message. Fighting evil with the ways of evil, answering might with might, just cannot be redemptive. The way of mercy and compassion, nonviolence and forgiveness, that is the power of God, and it changes things. Because in the end, no matter how death-dealing things are, no matter how loud the voices of hatred and fear are, resurrected life comes in the light of love as we use our lives to show a different way to be in the world. This is the rest of the story.
Tonight, I invite you to think about something that has your heart gripped in fear or even loathing. Ask Jesus to save you from it and to show you a different way. Breathe deep.
When Jesus turned over the tables in the temple, I was filled with fear and frustration. I was afraid he was about to get himself killed. It was the risk he took, and in doing so, he showed us that pursuing justice is risky. It still is. I was so angry at the events that unfolded that week, angry at all the things that happened, angry at the way that things are. Trying to make a difference can cost everything. Hope seemed to die on that cross, but then there was the rest of the story. What rose up out of that death was something that gave us all the courage to live on and spread the news that death will not win. You are part of the rest of Jesus' story.
In a moment of silence, imagine that your actions toward a more just world, your acts of kindness, small though they may be, are a part of the rest of the story. Ask Jesus what you can do to make your world better for others.
I'm the one who was in charge of keeping an eye out on Jesus whenever he showed up at the temple to teach that week. It was fascinating to see the crowds, how they adored him. And then, when it looked like he was really getting into some serious trouble, how some people got really frightened and started staying away or even turning on him. Fear is a powerful thing. Fear keeps us all small and sometimes silent when we should speak up. Fear is a terrible master. I even saw some of Jesus' closest friends, his disciples, deny they knew him. I felt the fear that night as he was dying. What has become of a society in which a teacher, a rabbi, a nonviolent person is deemed such a threat that we cannot tolerate him? Are we so fragile that we need to extinguish another?
Imagine what it would be like to transform the way we deal with our differences. Ask Jesus to teach your heart to understand and love someone who is different from you.
Well, we are here, gathered around tables, just like the times we were disciples we used to eat with Jesus, and whatever unexpected guest he had invited. I told you the story of the woman who came in that night in the last week with expensive oil. We complained about the money, and Jesus reminded us what really matters. That is, how we spend our time and love while we are here. He was right. She was preparing him for his burial. Later, we did tend his body with burial oils and linen cloths before laying him in the tomb. What burial wraps cover our own eyes right now? so we cannot see the true and present blessings of our lives right now? How much does our worry about the future steal from the present we have before us?
In our difficult days, it is important to remember our blessings. Ask Jesus to help ease your worry about the future so that you can live fully right now. Breathe deep peace.
My life since that night in the upper room was never the same. As the servant assigned to the room, I witnessed an amazing act of servanthood unlike anything I'd ever known. The honored guest took my towel and wrapped it around his waist and took on the duty of washing feet. Everyone in that room was stunned. Jesus didn't just stop there. He went through the ritual of a meal about God bringing people out of slavery and into freedom. At the end, he took bread and cup and said, it was the breaking of his body and the pouring out of his blood. We were to do this, remembering him. He dared to speak of a new way of being in a relationship where all people are of sacred worth, of equal stature. And this was such a threat that he was killed for it.
Remember a time that you knew you were invited and welcomed and included. Give thanks for the feast of love and grace that is the bread and cup we share every time we take communion. As we receive, it makes us one. Breathe deep the peace of knowing that you have a place at God's table.
After dinner, Jesus invited a few of us to Gethsemane to pray with him, and I fell asleep. Too much to eat. Exhausted from the week's activities. Stress. Worry. Fear. I was drained. I've been on edge, wondering when the next shoe will drop. And it did. They came. I wanted to escape back into the quiet of my nap. Sleeping, I can feel nothing. I can dream of better times. Life is hard. Challenges are real. Keep me awake and alert.
Considering the challenges you're facing right now, is something keeping you awake and you'd like God to remove it? Are you sleeping out of escape and you need God to give you comfort and strength to face the challenges? Tonight is a time to remember the rest of the story and what has been done for us in love. As we give thanks for the cross, for the crown that becomes ours, I invite you to think about what you need to leave at the cross in order to experience and become resurrection. For without crucifixion, there is no Easter.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of salvation. which was on that old cross. Jesus suffered and died to pardon and sanctify me. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. To the old rugged cross I will ever be true, its shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my house far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
This painting is entitled What the Savior Saw from the Cross. For 6 weeks, we've been taking various perspectives in the story of Holy Week. Never this one, this perspective from the cross, is the view of Jesus. What Jesus saw. He looks down and sees with the eyes of compassion, sees all of us. The good news is not just that life wins out over death in the resurrection, but also that from the cross, in the moment of sheer agony, Jesus' passion was compassion for the suffering of humanity. God knew our pain.
We had gone out with Jesus to a place where there was a garden. Judas was one of us, but had betrayed Jesus by selling information to the authorities about our whereabouts. Judas knew this garden place because we came here often. That night, Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the temple authorities. They came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus must have known what was going to happen, for he stepped forward to greet them.
Whom are you looking for?
They said they were searching for Jesus of Nazareth.
I am he.
When Jesus answered them, they stepped back and fell to the ground.
Whom are you looking for?
And again, they said they were looking for Jesus of Nazareth.
I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these men go. I do not want any harm to come to those that have been given to me.
Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear.
Peter, put your sword back into its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?
So the soldiers, their officer and the other police, arrested Jesus and bound him and took him to the high priest. My son was born blind, and Jesus healed him. The priests were indignant. They questioned us. They questioned my son. They tried so hard to humiliate us. It was no surprise then when I heard what happened when they took Jesus before the high priest. Caiaphas wanted rid of Jesus, saying that it was better for one to die than for all of Rome to be against us. I heard they questioned Jesus harshly about his disciples and his teachings.
I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said.
One of the police standing near Jesus struck him on the face for the way he answered the high priest.
If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?
And with that, they bound him to send him on to Pilate.
My job was to stand guard by the gate. I knew something unusual was happening. A man had gone into the courtyard of the high priest, following at a distance behind the police. Bound like a criminal, they were escorting that man, Jesus. Another stranger was hiding in the shadows near the gate where I was. I thought I knew him and asked if he was one of the followers of that man named Jesus. He said he was not. The slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire. It was cold, and they were standing around it, warming themselves. The stranger had made his way close to them so he could also be warmed by the fire. I heard one of the soldiers ask him if he was a disciple of the man that they had just arrested, and he denied it. One of the slaves of the high priest had been talking about how he had seen a follower of Jesus cut off the ear of a soldier when they arrested him. The man must have looked familiar, for he said to the stranger, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" For a third time, he denied knowing him. How strange. At that very moment, the cock crowed.
Just a few days ago, we were on the highest of highs. Now we are in the depths. My brother, Lazarus, has died. By the time Jesus arrived, we had buried him. Miracle of all miracles. Jesus had the tomb opened, and then he raised Lazarus from the dead. Oh, how it enraged the leaders. The questioning, the rumor of how they wanted Jesus dead. Early this morning, we heard they had won. They hauled Jesus off to Pilate. Pilate went out to them and asked what accusations they would bring against Jesus. They admitted he was not a criminal, or they would have handled it themselves. Pilate said it was not a matter for him to judge, but they insisted, as they wanted, Jesus sentenced to death. Pilate went into his headquarters and summoned for Jesus. His questions were direct. Was he king of the Jews? What had he done? Was he any kind of king?
My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. You say that I am king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice.
I was in the crowd when Pilate came out to address us. He had Jesus with him. He said he had no case against him, but following the Passover custom, he would release a prisoner. He asked if we wanted him to release the King of the Jews. Our answer grew louder and louder. We shouted, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Barabbas was a bandit. Pilate, his soldiers, and Jesus disappeared. We could hear the wicked sounds of the flogging. When they reappeared, what a sight. On his head was a crown of thorns, and they had dressed him in a purple robe. The soldiers kept striking him on the face, taunting, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again, Pilate addressed the crowd and said he had no case against him. Some of the leaders wanted Jesus crucified. Pilate said they would have to do it themselves, but they had no authority to kill him. I thought maybe Pilate would let him go, but he was afraid of the crowd. He turned to Jesus and asked where he was from. Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate was frustrated that he would not speak. He asked Jesus if he knew he had the power to crucify him.
You have no power over me unless it has been given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin.
Pilate had tried to release him, but the crowd said Jesus was setting himself up against the emperor. That's when I knew it was settled. Pilate had to protect Rome, so he brought Jesus to the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement. He said to the crowd, "Here is your king." The words still ring in my ears. The crowd burst into unison shouts, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! Crucify him!"
Some of us were huddled together trying to hide. Some were so afraid to be seen they had scattered into the city or out into the hills. I was there with his mother. After all, we'd been through this together. We could not desert him now. They brought Jesus out into the street, and he had to carry the cross by himself. They were taking him to Golgotha, the place of the skull. It was there at Golgotha they crucified him. 2 others were also crucified, and Jesus was between them. Pilate had an inscription put on the cross above his head. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, 1 for each. They also took his tunic. It was seamless, woven in 1 piece from the top. They cast lots to see who would get it. We were very near the cross. It took Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and me to hold his mother steady. Her heart was breaking. Jesus saw her. Also with us was the disciple whom Jesus loved. Jesus spoke to them.
Woman, here is your son. Friend, here is your mother.
From that hour, John took care of her.
I am thirsty.
From a jar nearby, a soldier took a sponge full of sour wine and put it on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth.
It is finished.
Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
As a soldier, this was the worst assignment. It was a day of preparation, and we did not want bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath. We had been instructed to break the legs of the crucified men and remove the bodies. We broke the legs of the first one, but when we came to the one named Jesus, we saw that he was already dead, so we did not break his legs. Instead, I pierced his side with my spear, and at once blood and water came out. I share this with you that you may also believe. My testimony is true. I am telling the truth. The scriptures have been fulfilled. None of his bones were broken, as it has been written. They will look on the one whom they have pierced.
Joseph of Arimathea, out of fear, was a secret disciple. He'd gone to Pilate and gained permission to take away the body of Jesus. Remember Nicodemus? He had come to Jesus at night and, in seeking, was invited to be born from above, anew by the Spirit. He brought a mixture of myrrh and other aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. Together, Nicodemus and Joseph took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices in linen cloths, according to their burial customs. And there was a garden in the place where Jesus was crucified. And in that garden there was a tomb that had never been used, and they laid Jesus there.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble.